Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Medill. Every year, Medill inducts a group of esteemed alumni into our Hall of Achievement. These individuals have each made a remarkable contribution to their industry in some way. Tonight, we are excited to honor alumna Cindy Chupack. Cindy was inducted into Medill Hall of Achievement in 2020 as part of our all-woman class in celebration of Northwestern's 150 years of women. This evening, during the discussion, if you have any questions, please post those in the Q&A section at the lower part of your screen, and we will hope to get to all of the questions before the end of our hour. Our conversation this evening will be led by our Dean Charles Whitaker, so I'd like to introduce Charles.
Thank you, Stacy, and welcome to everyone to what I think and hope will be a very engaging conversation with our guest, who, as Stacy said, is one of our 2020 Medill Hall of Achievement honorees, the acclaimed Golden Globe and Emmy Award-winning screenwriter, producer, and most recently director, Cindy Chupack. Cindy is, if you look at the list of television shows that Cindy's been associated with as writer and producer, I think you'd come to the conclusion that she's Hollywood or television royalty. Her credits include such iconic and groundbreaking shows as Sex and the City, Everybody Loves Raymond, and Modern Family. In 2018, she made her directorial debut at the helm of Otherhood, a next Netflix film starring three of my favorite actresses, Academy Award nominees Felicity Huffman and Angela Bassett, and Academy Award winner Patricia Arquette. And as if screenwriting and producing haven't kept her busy enough, Cindy's also found time to crank out a few books. Her first, the Between Boyfriends book, which is subtitled A Collection of Cautiously Hopeful Essays, was published by St. Martin's Press in 2001. Her second book, The Longest Date, Life as a Wife, was published by Viking in 2014. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times, Real Simple, Harper's Bazaar, People Magazine, Allure, Slate, and Glamour. Cindy hails from Tulsa, Oklahoma, where her passion for writing was first fueled in elementary school. She earned her BSJ from Medill, where fortunately we did not extinguish that passion for writing, in 1987. Cindy, it is an honor to have you here with us, albeit virtually, and congratulations on your induction in the Medill Hall of Achievement.
Thank you so much. I wasn't sure if I appeared before I was supposed to, but here
oh, that's okay. You're good. You're all good. You're all good. You know, even though we're sort of just meeting in this virtual world, I feel as though I know you because I know your work so well, and I'm such a big fan. So it's an honor for me to conduct this interview. And speaking of your work, I should say, hot off the presses, there's news that CBS has greenlit a new comedy that you've developed with the social media star Sarah Cooper, based on her book, How to Be Successful Without Hurting Men's Feelings. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they've just greenlit the pilot, and then we have to film the pilot, and then hopefully they'll love it enough to greenlight a series. But yeah, I'm excited about it. It's network TV, which I haven't done in a while. I've done mostly cable and streaming for a while now. But Sarah, she famously did the Trump lip syncs.
Right.
And she's really funny. And even before that, she had written a couple books, how to be I think How to Look Smart in Meetings, and then How to Be Successful Without Hurting Men's Feelings. And there was like a bidding war for her for that project. And I was attached with CBS to go try to woo her. And it was right during the pandemic had already started, and I happened to be visiting my boyfriend in New York. So I was able to meet her in person in Brooklyn. And it was great actually to meet, even though we were masked and sitting apart, it was great to meet. And I think it helped a bit. And then we've just co-written this together, and we only just got greenlit like 2 days ago.
Oh, wow. Well, it really is hot off the presses. Congratulations.
Thank you.
When will you start production?
So fast. It's like we're going to film April. I think I just got something that said, can we film April 5th? So everybody just, because we still have to cast.
I was going to say, have you done casting already? No, so you still haven't
cast. Starting to cast. Like we have an offer out, and we're just getting casting in. So it's all very fast.
Wow. Well, again, congratulations. And then shifting gears, I want to talk a bit about Otherhood, which my wife and I thoroughly enjoyed. Tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll take a look at the trailer. Give us the short premise.
It's it's so funny. It's been a couple of years since I've talked about Otherhood. Now I have to get my pitch ready. It's basically about mothers and adult sons, and it's about what happens after your kids leave the nest. And it's three women who on Mother's Day are feeling kind of neglected and not appreciated, and they decide to go visit their sons, their adult sons. And it's kind of what happens then and how they change.
Okay, let's take a look at the trailer.
What son forgets Mother's Day?
Yeah, buy me some bath salts. Is that so difficult?
I would like one Mother's Day card. A candle, something.
At this stage, it doesn't feel like motherhood. It feels like otherhood.
That is the best description I've ever heard.
What are we gonna do? Drive to Manhattan, storm their apartments? Nah, we gotta let them individuate, blah, 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 blah. Except it's Mother's Day.
We're not on vacation. We are on a mission. We are going to reconnect with our sons.
Don't take no for an answer. They can love you.
Mom.
Surprise!
Hey, Mom.
Boo! You didn't call me on Mother's Day.
I texted you.
I birthed you.
They can deal with having us in their homes for a few days. They were in ours for 18 years.
It's like you're living in Golem's cave.
Maj, are you cooking?
You want to meet me after work?
I have a party tonight.
Oh, well, Mother's invited?
No. I mean, no.
We're in the middle of New York City. We are going clubbing.
I didn't go clubbing when I was supposed to go clubbing. Would we even get into a club?
Well, I didn't think I'd get any of these jeans. Look at me now.
What is that move?
Twerking.
You know who you are without me. I need to figure out who I am without you.
Where have you been hiding those?
This big, bruised, beautiful thing, this is your life. I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Since when?
Since today.
You taught me there is room in every story for a better ending.
You will always be my mother.
Thanks, Mom.
You know how long it's been since I've had sex. I was gonna say pizza.
As I said, it was really delightful. We identified. We have my wife and I have two adult sons who never call, so we identified with it greatly. What was the genesis of it? How did you come to that story?
It was such a long process. I got the job to rewrite a script. It was based on a British book called Whatever Makes You Happy. Mark Andrus, who's won an Oscar for films, he had written the first draft, and they still often hire a writer to do like a polish. So I got hired many years ago to do the polish on that screenplay. And I took the job because I loved the screenplay so much that I didn't want anyone to mess it up. Like I didn't want it to become a big silly movie because it's got so much heart and depth, kind of, even though it's funny. And then I thought, well, now a million directors I know are going to want to do this. And I even sent it to a few directors after I did the rewrite, just this is going to be coming down the pike, thinking that they'll be so, grateful that I gave them the heads up about this. And then that was at Fox Searchlight, and it never got made. Everybody, people were busy. People just didn't get it. And I was working with a producer who even though I was kind of younger I don't have grown kids. I have a 10-year-old daughter, but I just felt like it was such a relatable, great, fun story, and kind of for everybody, because the boys, and there's a story. So it just stuck with me, and I couldn't seem to let it go. And then years later, that producer said, maybe you should direct it. And I had kind of thought about directing, but I'm one of those writers I've actually had good relationships with directors. I haven't spent my whole life wishing I could direct my own work. I like that 1 + 1 = 3 that usually happens with the director.
Yeah.
So I wasn't chomping at the bit, but I really wanted to get that done. And then we went through a few casts, and people would fall out. Like, trying to make a movie, I realized when I was doing it, is like, it's like if you were going to say, let's hold the Olympics, but let's make sure everybody can do it on the same date. So just send out a Google Doc, because to coordinate all those schedules was just an insane thing. And so we finally got to make it with that cast. And then we were coming out on Mother's Day, And then Felicity Huffman got arrested.
I know, I was about to say, I was wondering how that affected things.
What? How is that possible? So we were delayed a little bit longer, but it finally came out, and she was great to work with. I mean, it was just like, oh, of course, something else. So
Yeah.
I'm proud of it though, and I really enjoyed the process. And right before I directed it, I was working on a show called I'm Dying Up Here for Showtime, and I had in my contract in the second season to direct an episode. And as the second season rolled around, being, I don't know if I want to say such a girl, but I think I'm allowed to be sexist about it. But I kept thinking I'll just give them an out, because I was a high level producer and writer on that show. I didn't want to make it awkward. I wasn't sure if they wanted, and my manager just pushed me and said, no, you're directing one. And it turned out to be great, because I did it right before I left to do the movie.
Oh wow.
The crew I knew, and in addition, the Directors Guild has they now have a required full-day course for people who want to direct episodic. And so that was actually great, because I went feeling like I was insecure about the cinematography part of it, which a lot of directors might be listening and thinking, that is directing. That's what I thought. But then that course, that was a small part of it. But then there's, casting, everything I had done as a high-level writer and producer of television shows. So, and there were DPs there who were great at the directing, the cinematography part, but were very insecure about the rest. So it was a good reminder not to think, of your glass 1/8 full.
Yeah. So how was it though, stepping behind the camera, and really helming your baby as opposed to turning it over to someone else? Do you have a different mindset once you, and are the words less precious when you're actually directing as opposed to when you've written them?
They were. I felt less precious about it. I did rehearsal with the actresses and the mother-son combinations, and we would do it as written, and then I would just let them sort of riff, and a lot of what they came up with, we ended up putting in the script. And so I really liked the collaboration that way. And but also they were respectful of the words. It wasn't like a total ad-libbing kind of thing. But it's still creative. I was surprised how much you still are coming up with on the fly. You're kind of still writing, even if it's not the words. You're coming up with how to stage it and make it all work. So it was, and then even in the editing process, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed going, from the beginning to the end with it. Yeah. But then again, I'm not directing this pilot, and we have a great director who did the British series Gavin and Stacey, and she's done pilots and she's done a lot of TV, and I feel very comfortable letting her do that and having, just being able to be a writer and producer again and make sure that, have a bird's eye view as opposed to be.
But do you want to direct more?
I do. I would like to direct more, definitely. And I'd like to do like
episodic television or films or both, or
both. I think I've got another Netflix film I'm writing that I would direct, and like to do episodic television. But I still love writing.
It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that streaming services have opened up new opportunities for women behind the camera, but also just for women's stories. Is that correct? Is that a good assessment?
Yeah, I think streaming just opened it up for all sorts of voices that
yes.
were. Broadcast was broadly cast, named, and they wanted to reach the same audience, the same kind of car buying audience, and it took them a while to even realize, women might want their own shows on broadcast. So it wasn't until streaming that, because I know even with our movie, they really want to reach new audiences because they wanted new subscribers. So they can take a chance and do something that feels very niche or niche that, maybe they wouldn't take a chance on broadcast, but I think broadcast is now learning lessons from streaming, because those really.
And Hollywood was so focused on tentpole movies, superheroes, and also not interested in niche, right? They want blockbusters, and so
Well, it's funny, niche even. I feel like for a while it just squeezed out all the kind of movies that I loved, the sort of character-driven movies, and maybe nobody has cancer or is suicidal, but it's still a great story. Even romantic comedies, unless they were really big, and really funny and, huge stars, they were just getting squeezed out of the market. And the indie film was kind of getting squeezed out of the market too, unless it was maybe an awards contender. So and you can always know that. So it really made room for a lot, and they leave you very much alone, maybe just because they have such a demand on production. They have so much coming through and they want more product, but they really let you make your film. So that was nice too.
Do you see this continuing for a long time? Is this a blip, or do you think there will be some fallout or shakeout in the streaming market? There's so much content now. They're pushing so much out. I can't imagine this going on for very long, but again, I hope to be wrong because there is so much content.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like the combo of streaming and then COVID, where we've all been home and we want as much content as they can possibly provide.
Very true.
I think we've gotten very used to being able to just look and find something new all the time. It is strange because it used to be, you know, they talk about like water cooler moments in Seinfeld, or everybody at the audience would have seen it. And, you know, even when I worked on Sex and the City the next day in New York on the subway or whatever, you could hear people talking about the show. And everybody had seen the same episode and was talking about the same thing. So I somewhat missed that, but not so much that I'm so happy there's so much room for voices.
No, it is. It's an exciting time. Speaking of the pandemic, how do you think Hollywood and things are going to change post-pandemic? How do you think, or how has your life changed now again? And how will it change? How will production change? How will getting movies and television shows may change?
Well, one positive thing is that I've been in a few writers' rooms. There's a book called Fleischman is in Trouble that a writer in New York wrote, and they're adapting it for FX series. So I did that writer's room recently. It's all on Zoom. There's like a board like we used to have in a writer's room where you keep track of stories, and you can put a script up. And the good thing was we could have writers from wherever, like some of the, we had a very New York and LA room, and people could be wherever they were. So usually you're limited to who could be physically there. So that opens it up a lot, that you don't have to be in LA or New York, and you can hire anyone you love from anywhere. And I got to say, we were pretty efficient doing it that way. And in that room, we worked 4 hours. We worked 2 hours in the morning, took a 2-hour break in between. And during that time, you often read or worked, and then got back on Zoom for 2 hours. And compared to like a writer's room I've been in, or many writers' rooms I've been in, where you're there all day, every day, there's kind of a, you just sort of sit back and, there's chatting, and there just wasn't nearly as much of that. You're really efficient when you're there.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Let's go back in time and talk about how you got on this track. How did this all happen? Born in Tulsa, when did you always know you wanted to be a writer? And did you always know what kind of writer you wanted to be?
No, I had a teacher early on who told me I was a writer, and I just liked that I was a something,
How early was that?
That was like 3rd grade.
Oh, wow.
I kept in touch with her, actually. But I knew I wanted to write, and really what led me to Northwestern is growing up in Tulsa, I didn't know many ways you could make a living as a writer. So I thought journalism, even though it's harder to make a living as a journalist, but it's better than poetry or songwriting.
That was my story as well. I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I was like, well, writer isn't a job, but journalist is a job. So that's what I'll do. That's it.
Yeah. And then even after graduating, even after being at Northwestern, trying to find kind of my way, because I wasn't really a hard news journalist at heart, it still took a while, and it still takes a while to find the right kind of writing. Like, what is this exactly? And to find my way to comedy versus drama, and television versus, fiction.
But when you were at Northwestern, did you write plays? Did you do films? How did you nurture this creative side while you were in Medill?
Well, I took a poetry writing workshop that I loved.
Yeah.
All my grades were better than my Medill grades, I have to say. I did TN. I didn't work for the.
Where did you do TN?
I was sent to Binghamton, New York, which was sort of the Siberia of TN. I
have lots of friends who did their TN in Binghamton. I don't know that they necessarily felt banished in Siberia.
Well, I remember a friend of mine went to Cocoa Beach, and that felt like.
That's true.
I actually loved it, but they sent me on one assignment. It was to cover the longest school bus route in the area, the longest school bus route.
Yeah.
And then my editor said, and then I want you to ride the bus and take it in the morning and the afternoon. And I thought, okay, there's no reason other than they're just trying to get rid of me that I need it. But it actually turned out to be my first feature story that I was really proud of. That was
nice.
Like the personalities on the bus.
Yeah.
But I wish now, I mean, I feel like that I didn't really do radio, TV, film at Northwestern. And I feel like if I had it to do over again, I would love to just take advantage of all, not go to Medill necessarily, but just take advantage of all the classes and equipment and editing, just try everything, you know?
But when you entered Medill, did you have a thought that you might be a journalist, or was it just I'm parking myself here because I know I'm going to be a writer and I'm just trying to figure out what kind of writer that is?
No, I thought I was going to be a journalist.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I just didn't. I don't know. I guess magazine. I didn't really know the difference. Like I started to discover like David Sedaris and Mike Royko, and not the David, but like more voicey writers. Right after I graduated, and I thought I liked advertising too, and that was something you could do at Medill too.
Yeah.
So I thought to be advertising copywriting. That was starting to be the more creative idea that I had.
No, I'm older than you are, but when I was in Medill, Medill faculty were not that forgiving of people who wanted to do anything other than hard news. I was just wondering, did you find that to be the case as well? In fact, I wanted to be a magazine writer, and they were actually kind of disparaging about that as well. So I don't know, what was your experience?
Yeah, I think, well, I just often remember that, and I still feel like a lot of the skills I learned interviewing and shaping the story and finding the right verb, a lot of things I learned in Medill were still so helpful.
Yeah.
But I just thought I was not a good journalist. And I kind of left feeling like I don't have what it takes to be a news writer, and I didn't really find my way into more creative first-person writing until I graduated. But because of what I learned in Medill about submitting pieces and submitting to, I submitted this piece to New York Woman magazine with my cover letter and my essay, and that was the first thing that got published of mine. And it kind of started my career because some producers saw it and asked me to think about sitcom writing. And
really,
and those first-person pieces I continued to do in magazines. I would say also led to my job at Sex and the City eventually, because they were very kind of Carrie-like. So there was a trajectory I could see in retrospect, but it was very unclear when I was there.
What was that first essay about?
It was about New York. It was like New York is naming your mouse after someone you despise so you can eventually kill it. It was all these little New York is when a woman races across the room to ask whose dress you're wearing, she is not asking from whom it was borrowed, but for the name of the designer. It's kind of all my Oklahoma girl noticing New York things for this magazine that had like a back page essay.
So did you go from Medill to New York?
Yes, that was something that happened because of Northwestern. I interviewed at the placement center, and I found myself apologizing to all these newspapers that I hadn't worked on the Daily Northwestern, and I didn't really have the goods, but I did interview for this advertising job that was in White Plains, New York, and I didn't realize White Plains was so close to Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I was an RA at the time at Willard, and one of my students who was from New York, she goes, well, that's just like 45 minutes. If you get that job, you have to like live in Manhattan and reverse commute. And I was very intimidated by the idea, but that's kind of that job that brought me there. And then living in New York really became the basis of so much of what I became and wrote about in that first essay and writing later on Sex and the City, everything really.
Was Sex and the City your first television writing job?
No, I was on really stupid shows before that for many years.
Like that's what I thought. What were the shows you were on before that, and what was the climb like before you kind of hit pay dirt?
Well, first of all, I was just excited anyway to be working, even if it was what maybe later I would have thought wasn't such a great show. But I wrote that first essay, and someone saw it and encouraged me to think about sitcom writing, and I happened to be dating a guy who had worked at Drexel Burnham at the time, and that had just folded. And so we were going to move to LA anyway. And I kind of sat in on that writer's room. And I also took a class at UCLA Extension, a night class about sitcom writing. Yeah. And the teacher there had just broken up with her husband, who was her writing partner. And she asked me afterward if I wanted to write with her. So we wrote together, and we wrote a spec script that got us a job on what was our first show? Baby Talk. It was this like Scott Baio show with a talking baby.
Believe it or not, I remember that. I don't think it was on very long, but I do remember that.
Throw that around to impress people. So we were on that. And then the thing is, even on shows that aren't great, you meet writers, like some of the writers on that eventually ran Frasier. It's kind of a small community. And if you do a good job wherever you are, you end up knowing people that you meet later along the way. And so we did that show. We did other kind of shows that didn't last long. And but I was excited to just be working in TV anyway. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I was excited to like go to work on the lots and see what we wrote made into shows. And we always tried to write good stuff anyway. And eventually our first like good credit, I guess, someone who'd worked with us on one of those early shows was working on Coach and introduced us to Barry Kemp and the gang there. And then Phil Rosenthal was a writer on Coach, and he created Everybody Loves Raymond. Right. So he invited us over to that. And then while we were there is when I decided I wanted to write on my own, not as a partnership. And then you kind of have to reestablish yourself all over again. So he let us each separately write a script. And then I also wrote a Sex and the City. I was going to write a spec, and he gave me permission to go like freelance a script. So
nice.
It was a long journey. It was a long time where my parents were, my mom used to write the network and say how she liked the show I was.
Did she really?
And every once in a while I would go all the way from like network headquarters to me at the show. Like, is this your mother? Because we had the same last name.
So one of the things I like about so much of your work, and particularly on the shows that you've worked on, is that you do have a way of taking characters who are not inherently likable or families that are dysfunctional, but still making them lovable and relatable. What's the key to that? How do you do that? How do you find the kind of the lovable aspect of these kind of losers and again, somewhat unlikable characters?
I mean, I think as a writer, you have to love all your characters to write them well. Like you have to find something lovable about them. And the flawed ones are sometimes, fun and easy to love because you sort of know what's behind it. Yeah. I mean, I feel like when the writers on a show don't like even the actor, not necessarily the character, it sometimes comes through. So
really?
You have to find your way to, love and understand this character, which I think comes down to just empathy, like being able to empathize with all sorts of different characters and figure out how they're still like you and relatable no matter what.
When you're on a long-running show, how do you keep the characters fresh? How do you keep them from kind of getting old and stale and kind of and likable? I mean, and when do you know when it's time to hang it up?
Well, I guess when we joined Coach, it was like season 9, and one of the hardest things about that is just every story you'd think of, they'd say we did that, we did something like that. That's one sign maybe it's almost time.
I'll bet.
With Sex and the City, I think we were conscious we wanted to go before
everyone was sick of it.
Yeah. And I remember the conversation, but then like a year later, I was like, why did we do that? Like, I still felt like I had stories to tell, but it just felt like but I think it comes down to very much to how well the original show is crafted. Like Everybody Loves Raymond, even though you could have probably done that forever. Those characters, it was kind of a classic family sitcom. There's always family stories, and they were very well-defined characters, and there was a really funny dynamic between them. So that was an easy one to just, keep going with. You could, but some shows I feel like Sex and the City was really a specific time in their lives while they were single. And but anyway, now it's coming back and it'll be about a different time in their lives. But anyway, at the time it felt like we've done this stories, it's turning into something different now if we get them all paired up and it's about it just felt like it was time to not do that.
And the other thing about the shows you've worked on is they pushed at the bounds, I would think, of standards and practices on network television. and how do you do that? How do you keep just on this side of the censors? What's the key there?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a hard adjustment for me to go back to network.
I'll bet.
My Fair Lady, like I can't go back now. That's going to be hard because I feel like the other thing about being on cable was not just that you could say anything or show anything, but there were also stories you could tell. Like we did a show about about Miranda deciding if she wanted to get an abortion on Sex and the City. And we didn't have to worry about how, not just standards and practices, but, advertisers would feel about that. And
Yeah,
what we would
right.
say about how likable our main character had to be. There was a lot of like likability concerns sometimes on network. I feel like now network has, evolved a bit to keep up with cable and streaming. But yes, there's still people in standards and practices. And someone I just interviewed said she sometimes has to ask the person, they're like, is this your morality or is there a policy? Is this just bothering you personally? She said like it's a 100-year-old lady.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I think you try to push it though. I mean, and sometimes it just leads to some really creative and great solutions, like the famous Seinfeld "Master of Your Domain."
Yes, exactly. Right.
That was brilliant, and it kind of came out of those standards and practices. So once in a while, you come up with some gold because of it.
Oh, very good. I want to talk a little bit before I'm going to turn it over to their questions forming in the chat. Before I turn it over to them, I want to talk a little bit about your essay writing, because you've done a lot of comic essay writing. You've written 2 memoirs. Where did that come from, and kind of what's the source of your kind of comedic personal essay? Obviously it's personal, but yeah, where does that come from?
Well, really so when I moved to New York, I started reading. I mean, I always loved Mike Royko, but I started reading David Sedaris and Marcel Clemens and Meryl Marco, who has books of essays, and Cynthia Heimel. There were certain people I started to realize like, oh, this is a different kind of writing where you're really conversational and you can have your opinion in it, which was something we were very much supposed to keep out of news pieces. And there was no research necessarily. And it was just, you could be funny, you could be yourself. So I started loving that kind of writing. And at first I just did, that first piece. And then from that piece, not only did that move me into TV, but another editor saw that piece and asked me to write something for, this is a long answer to that question, but it was this piece for GQ that was, I had just had this experience which turned into a line in Sex and the City, but I had an experience where a doorman basically broke up with me instead of my boyfriend at the time, who I thought was my boyfriend, who was upstairs, and he said he wasn't coming down, and the doorman like had to break up for him. And so I had this experience where I had these really unsatisfying breakups, and I pitched to her for GQ this column called All About Adam, which was female perspective, like why don't men break up well? So I wrote this piece really addressed to men about why do you guys do this? And then that column got phased out and I tried to sell it somewhere else, and it kind of I got a few kill fees, which is like, a quarter of the price. And then I had a friend at Glamour from Northwestern, from journalism school, Ellen Brenau, who she said, would you want to adapt it for Glamour for our column? And so I changed it from talking to men to talking to women and more commiserating. And that was really where I found my voice, because I really realized I liked commiserating with women and not like telling anyone what to do. And I don't have the answers, but why does this happen? And so I wrote it for Glamour, and that started maybe just once a year I would write a piece for them about dating. And then at a certain point while I was on Sex and the City, they gave me a column about dating. And I had a few columns where I was like an expert, I guess, which I thought, what I shouldn't really because I'm home on Saturday night writing these, like I'm really, I'm not an expert, or I probably would be married at this point. But I wrote those and then I just continued to love that kind of writing, because even television is you're filtering sometimes your personal stories through other characters, but that's just the pure you. And sometimes I also like storytelling shows, which are just first person also, that you read essays or to practice essays. And my books were collections of essays. The first was a collection of essays about dating called the Between Boyfriends book, and the second was The Longest Date, Life as a Wife, and it was a little more narrative, but it was still like individual chapters, essays.
And how do you know if something is how do you know when you have a book? How do you know when you have enough essays for a book, in essence?
It was kind of my goal, because I had loved Meryl Marco and Cynthia Heimel's books. So when I took the Glamour job of having a relationship column, I thought that'll help me generate, because I really wanted to write a book. But I knew it was like a certain period of time. I had a whole collection of books on dating, but when I tried to sell that, and there were a couple of bidders, but the editor I went with was one who she came up with the idea, why doesn't it go from breakup to your next boyfriend? So it was we organized them that way, and that helped me figure out what I was missing and how to fill in. And so I felt like that covered. And then my second book was very much a baby quest. So it started like 5 years into a marriage and followed till we adopted our daughter.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Very good. Finally, before I go to the questions from the chat, you're being archived at Northwestern. Congratulations, another wonderful honor. What does that mean? And what's going to go? What will I find in the Cindy Chupack archive?
When I heard, I was like, does that mean I'm like dying soon? Is this bad to be?
No.
But yeah, it's exciting because I have saved, and my mom has saved so many, like from when I was a kid, my writing.
Oh, wow.
It's hard for me to fathom why this is going to be helpful to someone. But anyway, I have saved a lot of drafts. And so it's everything from like stuff I wrote as a kid, my TN stuff, my drafts. Yeah, it's photographs. It's like all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
Which is kind of great because I have, I mean, and I guess they send you like this whole organized, you know, here's what we have this and your personal life and this and your, anyway, I think some things you can put a limit on till like a certain number of years after you're dead, which I probably will for certain personal emails. Or after your parents are dead.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, they use it like for all sorts of research. I don't know. It really is hard for me to visualize. It's going to be helpful to anyone. But
I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it'll be fascinating. I'm absolutely sure. So have they started assembling it already?
I have like boxes and tape, and I went through my storage unit and just had this funny like down memory lane of all, because I mean I had a pilot I did with Elton John at one point. Wow. So I found like pictures and passes from his concerts. And yeah, I've had some, you know, some things that didn't turn into shows, but were just amazing experiences. So it's kind of fun to go back through.
I think that's going to be very, very cool. And I think that, you know, some aspiring screenwriter is going to find that all fascinating. Yeah. Congratulations. I'm going to go peruse it as soon as it's assembled. I will go to the archive to peruse the Cindy Chupack archive. Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's take some of the questions that we have here. This one we've sort of touched on, but I'll try it again. Someone said, you know, how do you think COVID changes the way audiences, we talked about production, how do you think COVID will change the way audiences watch and consume TV and theater? You know, is it all going to be phones and iPads? And do you think about the device when you're writing? Do you think about how people are consuming when you're writing?
I mean, it's hard for me to think about people watching something on a phone when you spend so much time, but I know they do, and it's good that they're watching, and so that's okay. I mean, I do think it has changed because there is something kind of nice and personal about movies that you wanted to see that maybe you wouldn't see that you can just watch at home or you can watch with family. And so, and I love all the international television and the fact that we can watch shows from all over and find actors and writers from all over. So I think it's definitely changed because a lot more people who maybe weren't watching streaming started watching streaming. And those of us that were watching streaming have learned to binge.
Yeah. Indeed.
And even just that you can binge, and so you kind of start writing to that cliffhanger, like you really want to get someone to the next episode. So that's changed the writing a bit. I hope there's still theater. I mean, I hope we still go to movie theaters. Yeah. But I think it would be nice if it could be available in a movie theater, but it could also be available at home because there's certain lots of communities that don't have movie theaters, or So that was one of my Oklahoma things. I used to say theaters for the longest time. I only recently realized that not everyone was saying that. So now
that's our other point. I'm hoping that streaming demonstrates that there are these audiences for smaller films, for different voices, and that will affect, theaters, and Hollywood will start making more of those kinds of movies as well. I mean, do you think that will have an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. Because for the longest time, when we were trying to set up my movie Otherhood, we're told everything that Hollywood with foreign financing. It used to be you had to have a certain number of stars. It was thought that comedy doesn't travel internationally. It was thought that movies about women, you needed a big male star. There were all these reasons that they thought these weren't as successful. And then with streaming, they're able to actually really track who's watching in what countries, and they've disproved a lot of that. And I think they've disproved it about international and smaller stories. And yeah, so I feel like that should translate into more creative, more film. But also I think maybe we just are going to have to get over our feeling that it's somehow lesser not to have a theatrical release.
Yeah, I think
it's
that's
still
right.
exciting to see things on the big screen, but it's not like a TV movie. It's a film that happens to be distributed on television.
I think that's right. I think that certainly has changed. Our relationship to movies that are not on the big screen has changed. I don't think that we are nearly as dismissive or disparaging because it's not on the big screen.
Yeah.
Someone asks, and we have lots of students who fit this profile, what advice would you give to journalism students today looking to break into the entertainment industry?
Did you say to journalism students?
Yep, journalism students.
I would say, it's still good skills. If you're still in school, though, take advantage of the equipment, because it's just harder to get a chance to make a short film or edit a short film or write it or see people act in your work, while you're there, if you can cross over. And just remember that there's a lot of different ways your writing might, don't feel like you're not a writer if you're not a great journalist, or even if you try drama writing and that's not your thing. Sometimes it just takes a while to find the right kind of writing for you.
I'd say, again, a big difference in Medill of today as opposed to the Medill when you and I were in school. And I said, I'm considerably older than you are, but we are much more we do recognize that the Medill training is great training for a lot of different kinds of writing. As you said, it held you in good stead when you were trying to do all sorts of other things. And we do try to impress that upon current students and their parents, who often worry about the state of the industry, that this actually is good training. It's wonderful training for a number of different kinds of writing that you may want to do.
Yeah. I remember even when I first wanted to be a journalist, people saying that even before internet, it was still like, well, that's a dying thing. Papers are doing. I feel like people have been saying that forever. That papers.
You're right. That's very, very true. That is not.
Perhaps the form changes, but there's still so much reporting and so many online magazines and so much more room now for voicey pieces than there was when I was coming up. Now almost every magazine and tons of online, like the Salon. There's a lot of room for first-person essays, and I would say that. I felt first-person essays were a great selling tool, almost like a way to interview from afar for different things, because people just read them and they feel like they've met you, and maybe it helps you find your career sometimes.
I think that's very, very true. Yeah. Kelly, who says she went to school with you in Tulsa, says she's very proud of you. I don't know if you know who this is, but her question is, how long did it take you to find good representation, literary representation? That is a good question. How did you get your agent?
Well, like I said, I was in that class, and so the woman who was my teacher, who invited me to be her partner, she had an agent, but he still had to read our first script we wrote together to decide if he wanted to represent us. Yeah. And sometimes an agent will, I guess, back pocket you, they call it, where they'll represent you and send out your stuff and see if it gets a good response before they decide if they like you enough. So I just felt like it's so different now. The one thing I do feel like I've learned is, for people who are just starting, it's almost better to talk to people who started recently more than people like you might think. It would be great to talk to someone who's done a lot, but it's changed so much the way that you approach it. But when I was trying to find, and I've switched agents since, I just feel like someone who loves your work and understands everything you want to do, even if it doesn't fit into a perfect box, is the best kind of agent, because they're going to be selling you.
Do you have a different literary agent than Hollywood agent, or is it the same?
I have, so they call it there's TV lit, and then there's movie lit, and then
exactly.
And then there's also a lit agent that I have for my books that's in New York. Yeah. Okay. And she, the first agent I got, it was when I was still at Sex and the City, and he had done a book by Paul Reiser and Seinfeld. And I remember thinking like, well, I could sell those books by Paul Reiser. But he did like my work, and I felt like, and so he did my first book. But my second book, I really liked this agent who I didn't really have the book yet. I just was looking for an agent for my magazine work, because I had this feeling I wanted to try to do classier in my mind. I still want to do a New Yorker piece one day.
Yeah.
She talked to me and she was talking about marriage, and she was like, oh, I think you have another book in you. She kind of pushed me and saw that what my next project could be. And I liked her for that because I knew she would like push me and she could visualize things for me.
Yeah, this next question, you've mentioned several writers that you admire, David Sedaris and others, but who's writing do you admire? And are there people, both I would say literary work, books and essays, but also Hollywood and screenwriters whose work really sort of excites, makes you laugh? Or...
Nick Hornby was one of my first. He kind of did for me what those writers did, because in fiction, he's so good. He wrote About a Boy and Fever Pitch. And I actually got to adapt one of his books. It hasn't been made yet. And who knows? You have to think long term. But anyway, one called How to Be Good. But I loved his writing, and it kind of showed me that humor and conversational. He kind of wrote about men the way that I feel like I've always wanted to write about women, where you get sort of a peek behind the curtain of what they're thinking and their vulnerabilities. And it was I loved his writing, and it kind of opened up for me what fiction could be as well.
Yeah. I love this question because I know we all struggle with this. How do you know if your voice is one that people want to hear? Like, how do if are the rejections telling you that you don't have a good voice, or that you just haven't reached the right person hasn't, connected with your voice? Yeah. What?
That's a good question. I know it does take a certain amount of ego to just.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
I know, I think about that a lot. Like, does anyone care? I still think that all the time. Yeah. I mean, that's why I kind of liked storytelling shows, because you sometimes do a first person and you can hear if it's reaching people, if they're laughing or they're nodding with recognition, or I feel like you have to be writing conscious of your audience, and is it going to land on them? Not for any other reason, not because you want to be famous, not for revenge on someone. And then I think it's kind of like, you get a sense of, when I worked in sitcoms for a long time, that was great because, and this isn't voice, but since we were in front of a live audience, you could hear right away, you got feedback right away if jokes and stories were working, and you could tell when people were following along. And now I feel like I have that sense even without having an audience, because I got used to that. But I tried even stand up for a little while to, just because my teacher told me, that woman who was my partner for a while, she encouraged writers to try like the groundlings or stand up, just to get used to trying out your material and tightening your material and tightening the attitudes. And I mostly realized like that's not what I want to do in any way, but it helped me figure out that what I was saying and coming up with that I thought was funny would connect with an audience.
Well, when you're writing, go ahead.
No, just, at a party when you're telling the story, are people engaged or are they wandering away? That's one good way to know.
When you don't have a live audience, how do you know? I mean, when you're filming and there's no one to gauge whether the jokes are landing, what do you rely on then?
For me or for other people? Because I feel like I do have a little bit of a sense now, but also you hear the actors were like, sometimes when you're casting something, you feel like it doesn't work at all until the right actor does it. And then you're so pleased that it like is as funny as you hoped it would be because it's the right actor. So sometimes you do have to parse out what isn't working. And that's, because sometimes it could be the casting or the staging or just the story itself isn't working. Sometimes when I'm having trouble writing, I know I'm just trying to get characters to do something they wouldn't do, and that's why I can't write it. Or the story's not connecting for me or for an audience. And but mostly it is kind of like, are people excited to read it and see it? Just even you have to be careful it's not just friends and parents who might love anything. Yeah. But
is writing so hard for you? I mean, is it, sometimes for me it's like opening a vein, but is it easy? Does it just come to you? Do the ideas just flow every day?
No. I mean, that second movie I'm writing for Netflix, I've had such trouble with, and I've been trying to figure out, is it the pandemic? Is it material's too close to me? Am I just being lazy? And something's not working if I'm not excited to write it. I mean, but it's still hard, especially the early part. breaking a story and figuring out if there's enough of it. And, that's just hard no matter what. I find I've worked on some really great shows where I'm not running the show, I'm just a writer in the room. And I kind of love that because I feel like I can be a great, asset contributor, but I don't have to be thinking what's everyone doing all the time and am I going in the right direction? I just do what someone's telling me. I find that really easy, fun writing.
But I love editing. I love editing now much more than writing because I can shape anyone else's work far better than I can do my own. Yeah.
Well, even your own though, once there's a draft, right?
Yeah,
it's so much easier.
Yes.
But that first empty page, that is still very hard. I do like it. And when I think I'm when I think I have a good idea, it's fun to write. So, but it's still not easy.
I love this question. When does figuring out what you want to be when you grow up stop being scary?
That's such a funny question. Well, first of all, you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to figure out and stick with it. How about that?
Exactly.
Like I thought I wanted to be a journalist, and then I thought maybe I wanted to be a magazine writer or a copywriter for television. And then even after I was a TV writer, I thought I want to write, maybe I prefer writing like single camera instead of sitcoms. And then I wanted to direct just because that actually I enjoy still learning. But I know a lot of people who have shifted careers completely. Like it's easy to make sense of your career trajectory at the end, looking backward.
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly.
It's not always clear, right? Like sometimes you do something that feels like very out of left field, and then you later look back and go, "Oh, that really contributed to what I became somehow."
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think young people do think that it's linear, and that life is this linear path, and you're on it, and you figure it out, and then you just keep going in this direction. But yeah, now more so than ever, you're zigging and zagging all the time. You just have to stay open. Just have to stay open to the possibilities. So
yeah. Sometimes you maybe also have to just pay attention to what sort of other things, not just the thing, but like the stability or whatever, because like now television, because of all the streaming, you really have to kind of cobble together your year. And even for me, and I still have expenses, and I have a daughter, and I have to figure out, okay, what do I need to make, what can I do, and that show lasts this long, and then and so you're kind of always looking for a job, as opposed to people I know who are in some businesses where you have your job.
Is that nerve-wracking? Is the constantly looking for a job nerve-wracking? Are you now just accustomed to that? That is your life, or is there some point in which that is, obviously it can't be paralyzing because you still got to pay the bills. But is it nerve-wracking?
It really can be. Like it's stressful because you're trying to figure out, and when I was on Raymond, let's see, Sex and the City I was on for 5 years, and that was the longest, and you knew you were coming back and the show was coming back, and we had a hiatus where you could sort of do your own thing during that period. That was the most stable I've had, and that was still being bi-coastal and traveling between cities. But beyond that, I've been on shows for maybe 2 years or so, and then you're looking for your next one, and then you don't know if the show's going to last. And now these little short orders, and there's mini rooms, and in some ways I like the variety, but in other ways, it's stressful because you're just constantly looking for your next thing and trying to evaluate and trying to get used to it and trying to figure out the characters and creating, and is it going to go anywhere? It's all fun, nothing to complain about, I guess, but it's still not easy.
Someone asked, does your daughter think you're funny?
I think she's funny, especially. I just joke with her, sadly, especially during COVID, she's really what I have right now. So I talk to her about my job. She writes me like encouraging notes, even though she's 10. I laugh about, she was an extra in my movie, but the first day I was directing my movie, I felt very intimidated that first day, especially with those actresses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Olivia gave me this little good luck fairy to go with me. And the first day went really well. And the next day I said, I think I need that good luck fairy again. And she said, well, she's in China. And I was like, well, get her back. And she said, you can have this other one, her sister. I was like, no, she doesn't know how to direct.
Break the juju here. You got to keep this going. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
She does. She's only 10 though. I don't know. Probably in her teens, she'll stop thinking I'm funny, but I still find her funny and she still finds me funny, I think.
And then this may have to be our last question. We've got a lot of good questions here, but someone did ask whether the Me Too movement has appreciably changed Hollywood, as best you can tell, or was that just lip service? Where are we in the post Me Too movement, Me Too era, if you will?
Well, we just canceled Cuomo, who was my part-time boyfriend during the pandemic. I mean, it's intense. It's definitely changed the way people do things. People are aware. I mean, it's probably occasioned this show I wrote in some ways because Sarah and I, her book, How to Be Successful Without Hurting Men's Feelings, is kind of a way to get it. How complicated everything is now and how we figure it out, and not just what men do, but what women do to get in our own way. But I feel like a lot of good things has come out of that. The best thing to come out of the Me Too movement to me is just women realizing that they don't have to carry around those kind of secrets and those. Now we know what's acceptable. It is out there, what is acceptable. And when people misbehave, I think it's really clear, and it was much hazier before. I mean, there were certain things people did that felt like, how did you think that was okay? But there were other things. I think just now that we have a dialogue, hopefully it will help us all, be more sensitive. But it's definitely, it's made it for a short while, and I don't know how long this will continue, that I know plenty of white men who feel like it's hard to get a job in Hollywood right now.
Yeah, right.
And there's a lot of the rest of us feeling like, sorry, for a long time. I think that pendulum will swing back in the middle where it's.
I think you're right. Yeah, I'm crying any tears right there, but for now. But anyway, Cindy Chupack, it has been such a pleasure. I could talk to you for another hour or so. It has been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much. And I think the questions in the chat show that folks have been really engaged, and there are many more questions here that I didn't.
I hope we got to most everything anyway.
I think so. But thank you. It's been really wonderful. We hope to have you back on campus sometime soon so that we can meet in person. But congratulations on all your success. You make Medill incredibly proud. We are so proud to call you an alumna, and wish you continued success as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
Stacy, I will turn things back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Charles. And Cindy, thank you so much. That was delightful. And I agree, we could go on and on and on and enjoy listening to you further. I just wanted to let everybody know that we will also be honoring the rest of the 2020 Hall of Achievement inductees as we go through the spring quarter. Our next event will be on Thursday, April 8th, and we will be honoring our women in journalism with 3 of the other inductees. So we hope that you'll join us for that as well. If you are interested, please look at our website, which has all of our event details and the links that you need to join us virtually. So thank you so much for attending tonight. And thanks again for your time, Cindy. Congratulations.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.